When World War II is being discussed, it's often addressed with a heavy focus on Europe. Many seem to forget that empires with territorial claims all around the world were fighting the war. While Europe is where many of those empires were centered, it's important to remember what their colonies were doing during the war, as while the colonial grounds may not have been the end goals, colonies still provided resources for the ongoing war in Europe and the Pacific. So, I want to talk about the colonized African fronts, the contributions of various colonies, and the unfair treatment of them. This video will just briefly touch on the whole subject, as all topics discussed are complex and cannot possibly be discussed in detail in a few-minute-long video. Most of the fighting in Africa was centered in North Africa. There were other campaigns like the one in East Africa, where Italy invaded Ethiopia and the British liberated it after a few years, but North Africa was the main front. Within the North African front, there are three primary campaigns: the West Desert Campaign, Operation Torch, and the Tunisia Campaign. The West Desert Campaign lasted from 1940 to 1943. It was a series of battles over control of Egypt and Libya. Libya was an Italian colony at the time of the war, and while Egypt had technically gotten its independence from Britain, the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty of 1936 meant that the British was still allowed a military presence in Egypt, and Egypt was also under heavy influence of the British, as was its foreign affairs. However, during the war, Egypt itself remained neutral. Even with its neutrality, Egypt saw itself become a battleground between the British and the German-Italian armies. Italy attacked first, pushing into Egypt to expand the Italian Empire and to control the strategic Suez Canal. The British wanted to defend their sphere of influence and their control over the canal. They were able to push the Italians back to the Libyan border. The German-Italian armies made other pushes into Egypt, each met with an equally strong pushback. Eventually, the British pushed into Libya, taking it from Italian control. Then, there was Operation Torch. It was a quick Allied victory on Vichy, French Morocco, and Algeria that lasted from November 8th to 16th in 1942. There was Vichy resistance, but they were quickly overtaken. Then, there was the Tunisia Campaign from 1942 to 1943. Where Allied attacks would slowly squeeze the German-Italian soldiers out of Vichy Tunisia. The Allies had planned for this to be a quick operation like Operation Torch, but it was much slower. It took months to get through, but the Allies made slow and steady progress, unfortunately, not without many sacrifices. Overall, the North African victories were essential for the Allies. African resources were vital for our fronts, and the strategic African locations were crucial for the Allies. Outside of colonial fronts, many colonies helped supply soldiers to the Allies, India being the prominent one, mobilizing 2.5 million soldiers for the war effort, not only helping the fight against Italy and Germany in Europe, but defending against Japan too. India provided so many soldiers that, according to the New York Times, about 15% of all Victorian crosses, Britain's highest decoration for valor, awarded during the Second World War, went to Indian and Nepalese troops. Additionally, the Philippines mobilized over 260,000 troops to help fight the Japanese in the Pacific Theater, and over 166,000 African troops assisted as well. Colonies also helped fund the world effort. Many African nations gave interest-free loans of tens of millions of pounds, adjusted for inflation, to Britain, and donated tens of millions more to war charities. During the war, it was nearly impossible for colonial soldiers to climb up the ranks. Many colonial soldiers also received less compensation than their white counterparts. Many officers treated their colonial soldiers worse as well. According to the BBC, most Indian troops had to serve under British officers, as colonials were not thought to be officer material. Over 4,000 Filipino soldiers also haven't received any of their benefits from the US fighting for them in World War II. The African front, colonial contributions, and unfair treatment of colonials are all often ignored when discussing World War II. I just wanted to help shed some light on them if possible, and I hope you all took something away from this video. I tried my best to thoroughly research this video, and all my sources will be in the description. but if you spot an inaccuracy or something crucial that I missed, please let me know in the comments. This is my first video also, so I hope to be making more of things like these. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you found something interesting.